Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the album from Oland titled Wishbone. Now, several months back, in my review of Tegan and Sarah's album Heartthrob, I made mention of some of my personal distaste for the Manic Pixie Dream Girl trope, one that has grown increasingly popular with the rise of indie and hipster culture in recent years. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with this, those defined by the Manic Pixie Dream Girl character and image are often considered offbeat, quirky, and decidedly lodged in girlish adolescence. Now, what's key to all these character traits is that they must lack an inherent root cause. These characters are quirky and eccentric almost for its own sake, a shallow idealized fantasy from the writer and not, like an actual human being. And I'll be blunt here, I find the trope alarmingly sexist, considering that female characters often fall into this trope or are often treated by the male characters as precious or cute by these characters, and any potential nuggets of real insight or intelligence are solely marginalized as just observational quirk. These girls are treated as girls instead of women. And it really says a lot about the guys who are drawn to this, because they aren't looking for a relationship of equals or for a partner who can match their own personal eccentricities. No, they want a girl with just enough randomness and quirk so they can delude themselves into thinking that they're deep. Now, let me make this point clear. It's not the aesthetic of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl that's the issue, which is ultimately why I came down as mostly positive on Tegan and Sarah's pop-flavored appropriation of the image, which actually paid big dividends for them and proved to be one of their most successful albums. After all, Heartthrob was only trying to be a shallow pop album, and that particular aesthetic worked for that setting. But there's a lot of indie acts who have realized that the Manic Pixie Dream Girl image and style, well, it sells very well to the hipster set, which can be kind of unfortunate for acts with occasional real bits of insight, let's say like Regina Spektor. And as a music critic, it can be kind of frustrating to peel away any sort of artifice and see if there's anything real or substantial when so many indie acts are leaping aboard this trope when they really don't have anything to say and they just want to appear as deep. And with all of this comes back to Oland, a Danish artist who released her new album Wishbone 3 months ago and who seemed to be playing fairly close to this trope, at least on initial inspection. Now, I didn't cover this record because the critical buzz was kind of lukewarm and September was incredibly busy for me, but enough of you guys recommended that I check it out, so I gave it a look and I hope for the best. What did I find? That's kind of funny, because I didn't quite find the Manic Pixie Dream Girl, at least not in the way I was expecting. That subversion of expectations is easily the best and most interesting part of Wishbone by Oland. And on that idea alone, you know what? I'm kind of inclined to recommend this album, which is smarter than most people would give it credit, and most critics gave it credit. Unfortunately, the reason that most people didn't pick up on that intellect and insight is the presentation, which makes an admirable attempt, but just doesn't quite stick the landing. Now look, I should explain this. So let's start with the biggest net positive of this album, the songwriting and theme. Technically, the songwriting is average. The poetry is only okay. There's a couple good metaphors and running imagery that's basically serviceable enough, but nothing all that special. But it's the tone and the target of that songwriting that really got to me in a really good way. Now, you see, Oland is entirely aware of the shallow superficiality associated with the Manic Pixie Dream Girl image. So she decided to embrace some of that vacant-eyed quirkiness and then uses that image to viciously satirize it, and especially the guys who fall for it. She attacks the empowerment delusion of the trope and Renaissance girls. She rips into the brooding loners that said Manic Pixie Dream Girls are drawn to in Love a Man Dead. Next Summer then emphasizes the flighty and emotionally draining nature of such relationships for the guys, and in Pyromaniac, potentially the best song on the album, she shows the nastier underside for falling for such superficiality when there's something a lot more damaged and dangerous lurking underneath it all. Now, the album is titled Wishbone, but a more apt choice would probably be careful what you wish for. And the real hidden strength is that Oland still frames all these songs as idealized fantasies for the guys in question, thus allowing the songs to work on both a very superficial level and a knowing satire. What Kesha was for the club girls, Oland is for the Manic Pixie Dream Girl, and that was such a great welcome surprise. and it doesn't quite work all the way. And that's where we have to talk about the instrumentation and production. Now, the songs are driven by a lot of electronic percussion, most of which seems to have been pulled from the trap hip-hop recording studio next door, and very little of it feels anywhere close to organic or all that interesting. Even the moments when the acoustic guitar is dominant in the mix, there's no coherent melody lines that really stuck with me. Now, the main problem is in the production. It's overstuffed with a lot of clattering effects that don't really add a lot to the mix as a whole, and some of the beats come across as unnecessarily rough to balance well against the piano or the guitars. Now, there's also a real tonal mishmash with everything as well. At points, the electronica just comes across as too dark or forbidding to really match well with the organic melodies, and sometimes vice versa. And look, while I get that might be the point and it's supported tonally by the lyrics, it doesn't lend itself well to very cohesive tracks. On top of that, the hooks, look, they're just not very strong. And while the album is varied in the various types of instrumentations and styles that it brings to the table, a tighter focus would have done this record a lot of good. And the other problem is only compounded by Oland's vocals, which are... they're a mixed bag, to say the least. Now, sometimes she delivers her lyrics with a fair amount of pathos and emotional resonance, and I did appreciate that. But at other points, what might have come across as knowing acknowledgement of shallowness instead just comes across as disinterest. And the multi-tracking of her vocals just really doesn't help matters here. She reminds me a lot of indie pop singer Kimbra, both in her delivery and subject matter in satirizing tropes regarding women. But in that comparison, Oland just can't help but fall short of Kimbra's smoldering noir style and richer delivery and instrumentation. And look, while I get that part of Oland's delivery is supposed to sound flighty and girly, the portrayal is rather inconsistent and frequently is just replaced by the same shallowness that she was trying to satirize, which is kind of ironic to say the least. So look, in the end, this album has a really, really great idea that's only kind of half realized. And while I definitely dug the intent behind the lyrics to subvert and satirize the whole Manic Pixie Dream Girl trope, it didn't quite materialize as a coherent album that was all that enjoyable or particularly memorable. It's an album that's let down by inconsistencies across the board, and thus it loses a lot of its impact. I couldn't help but think that if a few tracks were trimmed out, it might have been a lot stronger. Now, that being said, there are some songs that do execute their intent well, and the songwriting is frequently stronger than anything else on this album, so it's still gonna get a 6 out of 10 from me. Look, folks, if you're looking for an album about Manic Pixie Dream Girls, Wishbone by Oland, it will deliver. Just be careful or you'll end up getting burned a little bit in the end. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. If there's any other albums that you'd like me to cover before the end of the year that came out this year, or if there's anything I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'd be more than happy to take a listen to either. So until then, see you next time.